So I noticed something weird when I was doing that last video. And that's this strange like coupling between this other value and the limit that gets applied. It's needed so that we can use memo here, need it as a key for the memo. But it's just like this weird dangling extra parameter. It's kind of annoying, and it suggests these two things together suggests that there ought to be an object. So that's what we're going to do in today's video. This, by the way, is the 15th installment in the Vibe Code Rescue series for the shot timer. If you haven't watched the rest of that series, I recommend you go back to the beginning and start there, or maybe do that after you watch this one. Anyway, I'm going to encapsulate this logic in an object and then replace these kind of more primitive parameters with that object in this video. So I'll start by doing the trick that I usually like to do, which is creating an extra scope so that I can manage names, and I can have two things named the same thing. And then I will go ahead and see where these are used. So the other value is only used here in the memo keys. So I will go ahead and figure out how to make that a good parameter. The way I'm going to do it is I'm going to create a new array. And I'll copy this. I mean, expanding that array into the containing array does nothing, right? It's an empty array. So I'll copy this, paste it. That's going to do nothing. I'm going to have two keys of the exact same value, but otherwise that doesn't do anything. And then I can delete this. So now I've transformed this array construction so that it results in the exact same array, but it's got an array that it uses to produce its values. And then I'll create a constant out of this. And we will call this the memo keys. Seems like a good enough name. I'll take this and move it out of the scope. Now I've got my memo keys living kind of as their own variable, and this looks a little bit closer to the logic that I would want to see, where it just kind of delegates to this other array. Another thing that needs to happen is I need to encapsulate this behind an object, so I need to create a variable for it. That's pretty easy. I'm just going to create a new constant, call it apply, and make it equal to apply a limit to duration, which I can then call wherever I do that, wherever I use apply limit to duration. So now apply limit to duration is only used in assigning the value of this constant, and other value is only used in assigning the value of this constant. Now I really want these to be in an object with an interface. So to do that, I'm going to create a temporary function. We'll call it temporary function. And then I will infer the return type and extract an interface. Here, we'll call that a duration limit interface. And just to make things a little cleaner for me, I'm going to call this, I'm going to use the other syntax. I suppose I could do it either way. It probably doesn't really matter. Anyway, so now we have this place where we create an object and then we destructure it. Well, let's extract that object into a constant. We'll call it limit. And then we'll need to replace our use of this destructuring with the object itself. So I will move that inside the scope. And actually, I didn't even need to do that. But anyway, so everywhere where apply is used, I will just prepend limit.apply. That's going to do exactly the same thing. So we go back to apply for usage. And we'll see here. And now it says, oh, this isn't used anymore. So I will remove it. And then I'll do the same thing with memo keys. I'll use limit.memoKeys. Okay. And now this code inside the scope is nice and object oriented. It's this line here where we take those parameters and make them into an object. That's the thing that's still a little bit ugly. So let's go look at the temporary function and maybe make it a little simpler. So I'm going to inline these values. And now I have a nice simple expression that I can use instead of this function. So I want to inline this function to get rid of it. So we'll go and look at where it's used, and we can say, oh, we know this is a duration limit. So I'll just say it's a duration limit. And then I can replace it with the expression. And now this temporary function is no longer necessary. It was just there to support like extracting things and wrapping things up as an object and that sort of thing. So now I have a limit object of type duration limit that has the right values and is constructed from the parameters. The next thing I'd like to do is make the limit object a parameter of on its own. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to these properties, and I'm going to make I'm going to make an optional limit parameter of type duration limit. And this doesn't change how anything works. It just means that when I'm calling the duration input component, I can pass in a limit object if I want to. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this expression that is used to initialize limit inside the duration input component, and I'm going to use it to initialize the value of this limit object outside the component instead. So I'll go somewhere where the apply limit to duration is used, and I'll add a limit parameter. And then I'll just paste that expression. We did this in the last video too. This is introduce parameter as cleanly as I've figured out a way to do in TypeScript with Visual Studio Code. So I will simply copy the values that it says it needs. It needs another value. Well, I know what other value is. It's next sec here. And then I'll go back and copy the initialization expression again and go somewhere where apply limit to duration is used, and repeat this process. Limit, paste the expression. Compiler says that doesn't work, but I know what these values are. I can see them right here, so I just copy them and paste them. And now I've got limit defined. Limit is specified everywhere where I call duration input, and therefore where I instantiate a duration input properties. So this no longer needs to be optional. And because it's not optional, I can cleanly destructure it and have it be a substitute for this limit value, because we know it's always initialized with the right value. Therefore, I can delete the limit value. Okay, now that I've deleted that, I can get rid of my extra scope, which I always do by just copying the contents, pasting it over the scope, and asking the IDE to reformat things. And now it's just a little bit of cleanup work. So we'll remove these destructurings, these declarations, and we've got to do one last task, which is getting rid of other value and apply limit to duration. So this, again, is fairly simple. We'll take them and make them optional. They can be optional because they're not actually used by the method that they're passed into anymore. They're both optional. We'll look at where they are actually used and just delete those usages, which is safe to do because they've been marked optional. Let's see. And now the final step is to delete the parameters. And in so doing, we've cleaned up the interface of duration input just a little. Instead of passing in all these fragments of the duration limit, we just have a nice, clean limit object. Well, I hope you enjoyed this one. I hope it was helpful to you. That's it for this installment. Thank you.